The only thing Paisley couldn't wrap her head around was why folks had such venomous tongues. What did she do to deserve this? She hadn't hurt anyone, never spread rumors, nor snatched anyone's fiancé. Logan was single, so why all the animosity toward her? Logan had come to their quaint village for some logging work, signed up with a specialized crew, and got busy chopping trees. There was a mountain of work waiting. He stayed with his Aunt Aquilina, a widow. She had just one son, Benjamin, who had also rallied his kin to join the group, enticed by the decent pay that arrived promptly without delay. Benjamin, however, had a cloud hanging over him, rumored to be involved in a mysterious death during some woods work. But no proof had ever surfaced, and that's how they lived. Around that time, spring made an early entrance. The snow melted quickly, revealing the wet, steamy ground underneath. Tiny sprigs of the first snowdrops cautiously emerged from the soil, sometimes alongside patches of withered snow. Fluffy stems plumped up, unfurling delicate buds which, under the warm embrace of the sun, swelled and eventually burst, displaying tender petals to the world. In different regions, various flowers were dubbed snowdrops. There was the sorcerer's sleek grass flaunting its dark purple hue among others. Paisley was picking a small bouquet in the meadow to cheer up her grandmother Savannah. That's when she ran into Logan. "You look like a fairy princess who hunts snowdrops, even though it's not winter." Logan grinned. Paisley beamed. "Yes, I'm collecting this for my dear grandmother. She's not feeling well, and I want to please her. And I also picked some cranberries nearby, in the swamp." She pointed towards the swamp. Logan leaned against a fragrant pine tree and looked at it curiously. "Do you go dancing?" he asked, raising his thick black eyebrows questioningly and slightly narrowing his brown eyes. Paisley blushed, then boldly met his gaze. "Yes, sometimes I do that." With that, she turned around and walked quickly home. The dwelling, lovingly built by her grandfather, radiated a cozy warmth. In the midst of spring blooming, the stove hummed softly, radiating warmth. In the kitchen, our grandmother was already engrossed in slicing fresh cabbage hidden in the cellar. "Now I feel a little more cheerful, so there's no point in going to bed." Grandma grinned, pouring cold water from a metal bucket into a hefty cast-iron pot. "I'll make some soup and stew the cabbage. That's enough for us for a whole week," she said, turning to Paisley and waving her hand. Dear God, snowdrops! How beautiful! Tears, like tiny pearls, instantly glistened at the corners of her eyes. She slowly approached her granddaughter and tenderly accepted a small bouquet. "My Samuel used to bring these to me every spring," she reminisced. "He'd say they represented us. Him the dark flowers, me the light." Her eyes glistened, and for a moment, she seemed transported back to her youth, to those cherished moments of bliss with her beloved. Those days were fleeting, yet filled with a joy that many might never experience in a lifetime. Samuel was a tractor operator, and she occasionally took the driver's seat too. Her husband had shown her how to master the colossal mechanical beast with ease. Their bond, a divine gift, lifted them above the mundane, forming a unity of souls often referred to as unconditional love. Grandma Savannah gently touched the elderly woman's shoulder. "I've gathered some cranberries," she announced, flipping open the lid of a small basket to reveal the large, moist, ruby-red berries. Savannah beamed. "Well, snowdrops and cranberries should see this illness off quicker." She rose gradually. "I need to find a jar for these flowers." Paisley promptly dashed behind the curtain, retrieving a jar from the large chest, filled with kitchen odds and ends, towels, jars, spoons, and big saucers. She filled the jar with water, placed the bouquet inside, and set it on the table. Then she assisted her grandmother in preparing dinner. They settled down at the table, where the aromatic soup and cabbage were waiting to warmly welcome them. Paisley, with deft hands, sliced the crusty bread she had baked the previous night, poured steaming water into a clay jug, and mashed cranberries to make a comforting brew. After saying grace, they began their meal. The next evening, Paisley noticed Logan at a local club where visiting artists had come to give a concert. From that moment on, Logan's paths seemed to cross frequently. He always greeted her warmly and behaved in a friendly and cheerful manner. Once he even chopped firewood for her grandmother, demonstrating the striking difference between himself and the village boys. Naturally, Paisley's heart couldn't help but flutter at his attention. Increasingly, she found herself scanning the crowd for Logan's tall, broad-shouldered silhouette. And when she did spot him, she couldn't help but smile until he noticed her. When their eyes met, Paisley would blush deeply, a vivid red like a poppy. However, the other women and widows in the village, who were similarly drawn to Logan, began to gossip. They would say, "Why don't you, Paisley, pay heed to our boys? But for a city lad, you're all smiles and glances. Is it the town life you seek?" Paisley chose to ignore their sideways glances and spiteful murmurs. Yet, at home, she sometimes let her emotions spill over, crying until her grandmother noticed, and wondered aloud, why? What harm has she done to them? It often happens that those endowed with kindness and beauty become the focal point for malice and envy. The very ones who spread hurtful gossip are usually those small-minded and envious individuals, unable to see beyond their own jealousies. That year, the marshland flora was particularly verdant, with the vivid red blooms of the small bushes sprawling everywhere, painting the rugged landscape with exceptional hues. Young couples were often seen wandering by the river, hand in hand. She realized she had taken quite a liking to the boy. Occasionally, he'd embrace the slender girl so tightly that unsettling sparks danced in his dark eyes. Logan was like an enigma to her, something elusive and mystifying about him. They perched on a small knoll, providing them with a splendid view of the river. The crimson sun was descending towards the horizon, casting vibrant colors onto the water's surface, slightly tousled by the brisk May breeze. "I'm not heading to the city just yet. There's nothing for me there. I'll stay another year, earn some money, and build a house. I won't remain at my aunt's place. I want to settle down, get hitched, and raise a family," Logan said, gently turning Paisley's delicate, flushed face towards him. "Will you marry me?" The girl gasped, overwhelmed by a surge of emotions. In her heart of hearts, she already envisioned herself as his wife, and today he had subtly revealed his earnest intentions. She smiled, nestled against his broad chest, and nodded, her heart pounding with excitement. They spent every available moment of the summer side by side, an affair that did not go unnoticed by the ever-watchful villagers. The young lass's head was in a whirl, her cheeks glowing from the man's passionate embrace. She daydreamed of being Logan's wife, raising his children. They would bring grandmother to live with them, should she fancy it. It was a long weekend. Paisley expected to see Logan today, but he neither showed up to fetch her nor tapped on her window. Perplexed at his absence, she sauntered down the street. By now, twilight had settled in, and lanterns flickered outside some houses. Near one house, the sounds of a lively celebration echoed. A tipsy, jovial group lingered nearby. A familiar face among them spotted Paisley and called out, "Looking for Logan's sweetheart? Come join us, everyone's here." Disgusted, Paisley kept walking, but then hesitated and turned towards the house from which the music emanated. The front door was wide open, and the room was filled with a hazy curtain of smoke, although the revelers didn't seem to be paying attention. Logan was sitting drunk on a bench, and Olga, a flirtatious widow with a bad reputation, was sitting on his lap. They kissed hungrily from time to time, acting as cocky as the rest of the crowd. Seeing this, Paisley stumbled and leaned against the wall. The guests noticed her and their laughter grew louder, inviting her to sit down. Benjamin, Logan's cousin, handed her a glass of whiskey and muttered indistinctly, "Have a drink." Make yourself at home." Paisley stared at him. "I don't drink at home." "We want to," Benjamin insisted, tugging at her arm. Paisley glanced away from Logan, only to find him scowling at her with anger etched on his face. With unkind eyes glistening, he interrogated her. "Why are you even here? You don't belong." A wave of frustration engulfed her as she retorted, "I don't need anything from you anymore." Determined to leave, she rose from the bench and aimed for the exit. But her escape was thwarted by Benjamin, who unexpectedly appeared in her path, tugging her towards him. She forcefully pushed away the intoxicated man, yet he clutched onto Paisley and forcefully dragged her to another room. He carelessly dumped her onto the bench, suppressing her with his weight, and began undressing her. Mockingly, he jeered, "You may be entangled with Logan, but you'll come to love me too." His hands roamed over her body, leaving her no choice but to scream for help. Desperate cries filled the air, while Logan's uproarious laughter echoed around them. Each plea for assistance went unheeded as Paisley fought against her assailant. As she struggled, her hands landed upon a hefty decanter resting on a nearby nightstand. Without hesitation, she swung it down upon her attacker's head, hoping to break free from his clutches. Benjamin let out a blood-curdling scream, clutching his head now smeared with blood. The girl hastily sprang to her feet and darted away from the ghastly house, fleeing its menacing occupants from both Benjamin and Logan. Near the baths, the girl couldn't hold it in any longer and vomited, her head spinning. Paisley retreated to her own corner of the house, collapsed onto her bed, and lay there feverish. For days on end, her fever raged, and her grandmother Savannah never left her side. Word spread quickly that Benjamin had slapped Paisley for stepping out of line, and Logan had just stood by and watched. A month rolled by before Paisley realized she was expecting a child. Logan, to her, was as good as dead. He had betrayed her trust. Not one of them had the decency to visit or apologize, acting as if nothing had transpired. With a hint of apprehension, her grandmother one day inquired, "How far along are you now?" Paisley, taken aback, almost choked from surprise, and then broke down, sobbing onto her grandmother's shoulder. There, my dear," said the old woman, running her warm, calloused hand through her granddaughter's golden tresses. "Better to learn his true colors now than after tying the knot." Just today, Riley let slip that Logan had ulterior motives for being here. Lost a lot at cards back in town, he did. Now he's under someone's thumb, working off a hefty debt. During the autumn season, when constant rainfall moistened the earth, a buzz spread across the village regarding Logan and Benjamin's mishap with the tractor, which failed to decelerate on a treacherous, erosion-ridden road and tumbled into a profound ravine. In that fateful moment, their lives came to a tragic end. Subsequent murmurings insinuated that there had been a malfunction in the tractor, something awry. Word of mouth carried this news, yet only Grandma Savannah displayed unwavering composure, remarking, "Machines, oh dear, they're prone to any number of mishaps." In April, Paisley gave birth to an adorable baby boy. It seemed that the presence of the newborn gave the grandmother youth, as the echo of his screams echoed throughout the house. Paisley ignored the idle chatter of her peers and returned to her duties at the local post office as soon as Samuel began to take his first steps. The workplace was conveniently located near their home. Gradually, but surely, the residents stopped remembering the past. In fact, they began to recognize Paisley's skill, admiring her resourcefulness. When Samuel turned 5, Paisley found solace in the company of the mailman, who also acted as her caretaker. Carter, a stern local lad, whom Paisley had known since their high school days, came to the forefront. Although his appearance may have appeared unremarkable to some, being tall and lanky, kindness radiated from within. He evolved into her lawful spouse, transforming into her unwavering support, a guardian throughout the many years they spent together. Mourning the loss of her grandmother, Paisley shed copious tears at her gravesite, expressing her gratitude. In time, she lovingly planted snowdrops near the wooden cross, intermingling varieties with fluffy leaves of enigmatic dark purple hues and others bearing a creamy white tint.